Originally developed in response to natural occurring emergencies, specifically floods. The thought behind the facility is that they would build a big reservoir up there and store water up there in the event of an unexpected emergency.
Were you here in 1965? Did you have to boil water? And that is where I come from for not tapping into this reserve. I don't intend to steal from my water supply that was meant for one purpose and one purpose only, the worst case scenarios. And if it's 50 years down the road, I want that tank to be there for the worst case scenario, because that's my obligation.
Fortuna building a 6 million gallon reservoir, intending that it not be used except in emergencies. Somehow that seemed out of character for frugal Fortuna. But maybe. So I made a trip to the Humboldt County Library. I wanted to check the newspapers to see if Fortuna reacted to the 1964 Christmas flood by building a new reservoir for emergency storage. I came up here to the second floor to look at the newspapers of that time. 1965 brought continuing coverage of flood relief, news of flood damage repairs to the Sandy Prairie Levee, congressional legislation introduced to fund extensive flood control projects up and down the Eel River, and also annexation was in the headlines. But there were no headlines relating to a reservoir. Before heading home, I decided to go back and take a look at the photos of the Christmas flood of 1964. Amongst the many photos, a couple photos of Fortuna's flooded wells, noting the need to boil water. As I rewound the 1964 tape, a Roanoke Park headline caught my eye. It was an article on the recent council meeting, and it contained this intriguing line. Authorization was given Dinsmore and city engineer John Winsler to start on the roofing project for the new city water reservoir. Back to the 1965 papers for a closer look, where I found a June City Council report that they had accepted a bid from the Somerville glue lamb manufacturers of Santa Rosa for delivery of laminated beams to roof the Vancil Street Reservoir. And a closer look at the annexation articles revealed statements such as this one in February. The city of Fortuna is not soliciting these annexations, it is pointed out, simply putting out the welcome mat and preparing through constant utility improvements to make it possible for annexations. It seemed pretty clear to me that the city was growing and needed more storage. However, some people suggested that perhaps the plan to build emergency storage started earlier, prompted by the flood in 1955, so it was back to the library. This time, there was no need to dig through countless articles. The city's water project was in the headlines. City seeks federal public works aid on water project. Fortuna City Council has formally approved an application for a federal grant on the city water system project. Fortuna gets federal water aid. 50% of the final cost of the municipal water development program has been approved in Washington. 8 years after the 1955 flood, and 1 year before the 1964 Christmas flood, here is the new city reservoir. The articles had not one word about floods or any other emergencies. This reservoir was part of a water development program. Let's take a quick look at how the water schematic might have looked before and after the 1960s water projects. I found the water system's draft 20-year capital improvement program, a late 1930s news article, and a Division of Drinking Water report helpful. Together, they give an idea of what the water system schematic might have looked like in 1959. That's the year identified as the year the Holman tank was installed, here with a red outline. The water pipe is listed as acquired the following year. From the information, it appears that in 1959, there were 3 wells. The water was filtered and then pumped to the 2 Stewart Street reservoirs. To the south, outside the city limits, there was a private water system. The situation in the hills above town to the north and east is not clear. Looks like the 1960s saw an overhaul of the system, top to bottom. The projects are outlined in red. The new city reservoir, built up the street from the existing reservoirs. New chlorination building down by the wells and piping in between. The schematic cannot show the outward extension of the new pipelines. Into the hills north and east of town. To Newburgh and the Mill District in the south. The city reservoir on Vancil Street was built in 1963 to serve a growing city, and perhaps also to provide fire protection for wood products manufacturing. But what about flood emergencies? Well, 3 years after the earlier 1955 flood, federal funding was approved to help build this, the Sandy Prairie Levee. And today, despite their strong views on emergency storage, to date our council has taken no action to reserve Vancil as emergency storage. As for future flooding of the wells, the preliminary design review and an engineer of the State Division of Drinking Water suggest that there are other ways to help ensure we have water during the next catastrophic flood. But perhaps there's another reason a new tank would be urgent, critical, or essential to the operation of our water system.